Jeffrey Epstein trafficked girls, thousands apparently by some estimates. He had a pedophile island, he had an airplane, he had his mansions, essentially the various compounds where he could take these girls and be with these girls, and for the most part, nobody told. All of these top level friends, all of these people who are in political circles and media circles and in art circles, meaning movies and these type of things. All of these people, and apparently none of them saw a thing. He gets busted and gets a light sentence. And the question becomes, how on earth did this pedophile get this light sentence? And from my understanding, pedophile is just the person who has that particular interest, but this person who abused young girls, how on earth did he get this light sentence? But he did. And much of that sentence was spent where he was on work release. And while he was on work release, apparently he was also still abusing young girls. Acosta, Trump's person who was responsible for this case, at one point said this was above my pay grade. Weird, to say the least. Epstein gets popped. And the prosecutors come out and said, does anybody know anything about this? Meaning we are looking for people to deal with this because this was a travesty of justice and we are going to prosecute him. He is in prison. And while he's in prison, under the view of the state, because the state has an interest in him being on this plane of existence in order to extract, quote unquote, justice from the person. And this person is widely accused of being in a pedophile ring with very famous people, probably sweating in their boots. Just so happened, he tries to kill himself, supposedly. The inmate that was in there with him, who had bodies buried in his backyard, didn't see or hear a thing. And Epstein was taken to the suicide ward. Supposedly, the guards were supposed to be watching him like a hawk because, after all, he tried to, supposedly, off himself. Epstein was taken off suicide watch, but he was still under observation. The two guards that were supposed to be observing him went narcoleptic at apparently around the same time. The camera that was supposed to be watching that area of the hallway didn't work. And the person who was supposed to be under scrutiny to ensure that he was alive, that he stayed alive, the highest profile person at that moment in the prison system, ends up committing suicide. Initially, the examiner comes back and says it is undetermined how he died because there are aspects of this that comes across as if he was choked to death. And then Sampson comes and says, no, everything was great. Everything is good. It was indeed a suicide. He killed himself. A second examiner, renowned, looked at this case, examines supposedly Epstein, and says the breaks, or examines information, but it says the breaks in his neck are commensurate with somebody being choked, not suicide. Meaning the force that would have taken to extract the damage or to create the damage in his neck and the bones in this case are more consistent with somebody killing him, not him choking himself to death. The Epstein case has created all sorts of ideas on what happened. Some people think that's not Epstein at all. Other people think he was killed. Other people think he committed suicide. Whatever you want to think about this, though, let's be honest. Rational human beings looks at this and says, this looks dodgy. Either he was given space to kill himself, but the argument for him being given space to kill himself also allows, in the same vein, for somebody to kill him. Meaning the space that it allows for him to kill himself also is the space that allows for somebody to off him. This case has not gone anywhere, and the question becomes, what about Ghislaine Maxwell? Who else was involved? Bill Clinton was on these airplanes back and forth, just like Donald Trump was close friends to this guy. And one of the other people that was brought up in this, especially from the person or one of the women who came out and pointed the finger and started naming names because she said she was engaged with him for a long period of time, meaning Ghislaine Maxwell was finding young girls to satisfy Epstein. I think, the Herald of Galactus, in this case, the Herald of Epstein. She would find young girls for Epstein to devour. And in doing this, Epstein was able to take these young girls all over the place. Gumfrey, I think her name is, or Gouffrey, I may be pronouncing this slightly off. Names. The story, the news had this story going back several years ago, but they wouldn't let this story come out. There were certain people involved in the process that prevented the story from coming out and naming these names. One of the people that was named in this is Prince Andrews. Now, I know when I say prince, and I hate using the term prince because to me this sounds utterly ridiculous that we have to pretend that this person is a prince. This notion that God looked down and bestowed something on this individual and its family. That when he wakes up in the morning, it's there. When he goes to bed at night, it's there. The special elixir of God that is just there. He doesn't have to do anything in order to have this particular thing. By birth, it's there. Now, this is utterly absurd. And yet, we're supposed to pretend that this guy is a prince or that that person is a queen, whatever. In this very specific instant, though, this prince, royalty, part of the royal family in the UK, has been implicated. He's been implicated. This picture is problematic for him. Maxwell, Herald of Epstein in the back. Andrews, standing right here. And Gouffrey, 17 years old. She says they've had sex multiple times. She says she's been passed around to various people, powerful men, multiple times. And she says she's not the only one. How does Andrews explain this? Andrews, for a story that for the most part wasn't necessarily going anywhere in the UK, decides to have an interview. Not given the questions in advance. You can ask anything. And he sits down and gives an interview. Train wreck of an interview. The publicist quit over this because the publicist was like, this is going to be horrific. And it was indeed horrific. The answers that he gave were utterly ludicrous in many respects and ridicule-worthy most of the time. His excuses for this, in some parts, made zero sense. And what he wanted the public to accept, the public wouldn't. Meaning even the UK public looked at this and says, oh my God, this guy has been engaging with a pedophile and he sounds guilty of sin. Meaning the interview that he took came across so poorly that this story was thrust into the public attention in the UK and became a scandal because they looked at him and he seemed utterly and entirely outright guilty. He seemed guilty. I'm going to put the interview at the bottom so you can see the thing for yourself, but I am going to show various scenes in this because it's astounding. Like, this is as bad as Bill Clinton saying, I didn't have sexual relations with that woman, Miss Lewinsky. But in this case, it's a member of royalty, trying to explain away a photo that clearly shows him standing there with the 17-year-old that he said he never met, tries to explain away a relationship with a man who was convicted of being a pedophile and that he went to meet this guy after the guy was being convicted of a pedophile and tried to explain why that was the case, why he had to go and take that meeting. The reporter, the interviewer for this, is vicious. But she's vicious in a very particular way. This voice that cuts through you, British accent, neutral. The questions have a perspective, don't misunderstand me, but neutral. I'm asking questions. And in asking one question after the next, one question builds upon the next, which builds upon the next, which builds upon the next. Which, in many respects, she already knows the answer to, but him answering the question becomes so ludicrous. And I can't say that. It's not that she knows the answer to this question. It's more so that they're questions that are problematic for him. And so she asks those questions. And the answers that he gives are outright bizarre and came across as entirely unbelievable. Let's look at the interview that is rattling the UK right now. And despite there being a debate last night between Corbyn and Johnson, this is the thing that has been resonating for the past few days. Welcome to the Soapbox. My name is Jamarl Thomas. This is the Progressive Soapbox. Guys, if you dig this content, please like, share, subscribe. You can always support PayPal, Patreon. This content is brought to you by you. This video will be instantly demonetized. And so even $1 helps. Let's hop across the pond. Let's get into it. I don't know why anybody would do this video, if I'm being honest. Meaning, I don't know why he would sit down to have this interview. And nevertheless, here we are. Here we are. So he's being asked about why did you go back to visit Epstein? Meaning, you knew the guy was a pedophile at this point. You knew he was convicted of this. Why did you go back to talk to him? Why did you go back and stay with him? This is his answer.
Who advised you then that it was a good idea to go and break up the friendship? Did that come from the palace? Was Her Majesty the Queen involved?
No. That came from... So there were a number of people so some people from my staff, some people from friends and family I was talking to, and I took the decision that it was... I had to show leadership and I had to go and see him and I had to tell him that's it.
That was December of 2010.
Yep.
He threw a party to celebrate his release, and you were invited as the guest of honour.
Oh, in 2010? There certainly wasn't a party to celebrate his release in December, because it was a small dinner party. There were only 8 or 10 of us, I think, at the dinner. If there was
Think about what just happened. Think about what just happened. You went to see a pedophile. Well, yeah, but, I just went to tell him that this relationship was over. Okay, but he was throwing a party for his release, and you were the guest of honor. Well, there was no party. I mean, there was just, a dinner where a few of us were going to meet. That's the party, dude. That's the party. I hope you get her point. That's the party. Her point is, you went to see this guy. And when you're confronted on this, you're like, I just went there in order to tell him that our friendship is over. But you stayed for multiple days and then ended up going to a party. Well, it wasn't a party. It was more like a dinner. Whatever you want to call it. Why did you do it? She's making a point. Let's keep going. 11. Okay, let's keep going. There's another part to this.
If there was a party, then I'd know nothing about that.
You were invited to that dinner as a guest of honour.
Well, I was there, so there was a dinner. I don't think it was quite as you might put it, but yeah, okay, I was there at a dinner, yeah.
I'm just trying to work this out, because you said you went to break up the relationship, and yet you stayed at that New York mansion several days. I'm wondering how long...
But I was doing a number of other things while I was there.
But you were staying at the house of a convicted sex offender.
It was a convenient place to stay. It was
a convenient place to stay. The honest truth, the thing that he probably just can't say is, this guy was a friend of mine. That's probably the honest to God truth. This guy's a friend of mine. I've known this guy for a long period of time. I might have been messing around with young girls with him, meaning he might have been supplying me with young girls. And this guy was a friend of mine. Now, he can't say that. You can't say that. You can't say that. That's the thing that he can't say. So what do you say otherwise? I went to break up with him. Yeah, but you stayed with him for multiple days and you're party with him. Yeah, I mean, I guess it was convenient. I strongly suspect that the truth is, this guy was my friend. And then this gets even more ludicrous because he says, maybe I was just too honorable. Meaning going back to break up with Epstein, and she's pressing him on it. And he's like, look, maybe I was just too honorable. Maybe I was just too honorable. Let's keep going. What is this one?
During that time, those few days, witnesses say they saw many young girls coming and going at the time. There is video footage of Epstein accompanied by young girls. And you were there staying in his house, catching up with friends.
I mean, if they were, then I wasn't a party to any of that. I never saw them. I mean, you have to understand that his house, I described it more as almost as a railway station, if you know what I mean, in the sense that there were people coming in and out of that house all the time. What they were doing and why they were there, I had nothing to do with. So,
hey, they say a lot of young girls were going through this pedophile's house. You know, I mean, after all, he was running young girls. You never noticed that? Now, early on in the interview, he said he was working, or his line of work would have allowed him to detect the young girl thing if he would have saw it around him. He never saw it around him. They make the point that you were there with that pedophile when you were supposedly there to break up the friendship, and there were many young girls in and out of there. Are you saying you didn't see any of them? Nope. I didn't see any young girls while I was at this transnational pedophile's house. Here's the other part. 1340. Listen to this one. This one is awesome. Russian foot massage. It is said by somebody who was there that you were getting a foot massage by a young Russian. Did that happen?
I'm afraid I can't make any comment on that because I really don't know.
Another guest was Jon Brockman, the literary agent. Now, he described
Really?
seeing you there getting a foot massage from a young Russian woman. Did that happen?
No.
You're absolutely sure, or
Yeah,
you can't remember?
Absolutely sure.
So Jon Brockman's statement is false.
Well, I don't know Mr. Brockman, so I don't know what he's talking about.
Now, think about what he just said for the moment. Jon Brockman said you were getting a foot massage by a young Russian girl. No, that's not true. That's not true. So you don't remember that, or that didn't happen? No, that didn't happen. So Jon Brockman's statement is false. And it doesn't say yes. Why don't you say yes to that right away? I mean, wouldn't you just naturally say yes to that? Jamarl, we saw you having sex with a cat. That didn't happen. But Bob said you were doing that. Yeah, Bob's a fucking liar. No, that didn't happen. Now, I don't have to say, well, I don't know who Bob is. Why do I have to? Why does it matter who Bob is? Meaning, if Jon Brockman says this, and you said that never happened, and then you say, so Jon Brockman is wrong. Jon Brockman is wrong. Jon Brockman is not telling the truth. Well, I don't know who Jon Brockman is, so I don't know why he would say that. If Jon Brockman, if what you're being pushed with is not true, then Jon Brockman, by definition, has to be wrong. Meaning it shouldn't matter whether you know who Jon Brockman is or not. If you didn't do it, you didn't do it. I want to go to two more parts. Two more parts. This is where he gets accused or gets noted Dufree. And he's asked directly. This young woman says at the age of 17, you had sex with her. This woman, this picture, with, again, the herald of Epstein, creepily standing behind, watching. Let's hear him answer this. This answer is amazing.
A period of time to actually have a long enough conversation to say, look, these are the reasons why I'm not going to. And that happened on the walk.
July of this year, Epstein was arrested on charges of sex trafficking and abusing dozens of underage girls. One of Epstein's accusers, Virginia Roberts, has made allegations against you. She says she met you in 2001. She says she dined with you, danced with you at Tramp nightclub in London. She went on to have sex with you in a house in Belgravia belonging to Ghislaine Maxwell, your friend. Your response?
I have no recollection of ever meeting this lady. None whatsoever.
You don't remember meeting her?
No.
She says she met you in 2001. She dined with you. She danced with you. You bought her drinks. You were in Tramp nightclub in London. And she went on to have sex with you in a house in Belgravia belonging to Ghislaine Maxwell.
Didn't happen.
Do you remember her?
No. I have no recollection of ever meeting her. I'm almost, in fact, I'm convinced that I was never in Tramps with her. There are a number of things that are wrong with that story. One of which is that I don't know where the bar is in Tramps. I don't drink. I don't think I've ever bought a drink in Tramp whenever I was there.
Do you remember dancing at Tramp?
No. That couldn't have happened because the date that is being suggested, I was at home with the children.
You know that you were at home with the children. Was it a memorable night?
On that particular day that we now understand is the date, which is the 10th of March, I was at home. I was with the children. I'd taken Beatrice to a Pizza Express in Woking for a party at I suppose sort of 4 or 5 in the afternoon. And then...
Now, he's saying, I was at a Pizza Express. And so I know that what that woman is saying is impossible. I couldn't have had sex with her because I was with the kids and I was at Pizza Express. Now, this was supposedly at 4 something, and I would imagine that he had the potential to go out later that night, but he is being very clear on this notion. Virginia Dufree. Okay, the name is right, Dufree. He's being very clear that he knows very specifically on this very specific night exactly what he was doing. So he knows as a flat fact that this woman is not telling the truth. I want to get to the sweating because the sweating thing gets absurd on its face. So let's listen to this. She's going to make the point that, look, this woman said that you guys went to a party and you guys were out there dancing. Okay. And that you sweated heavily, that you had just voluminous amounts of sweat coming off of you. He gets really annoyed by this, and listen to his reasoning for making the point that this could not have happened in the way that this woman said this happened.
But as soon as somebody reminded me of it, I went, oh yes, I remember that. But
So-
I have no recollection of ever meeting or being in the company or the presence.
So you're absolutely sure that you're at home on the 10th of March.
Yeah.
She was very specific about that night. She described dancing with you
No.
and you profusely sweating, and that she went on to have bath, possibly.
There's a slight problem with the sweating because I have a peculiar medical condition, which is that I don't sweat, or I didn't sweat at the time, and that was yes, I didn't sweat at the time because I had suffered what I would describe as an overdose of adrenaline in the Falklands War when I was shot at. And I simply, it was almost impossible for me to sweat. And it's only because I have done a number of things in the recent past that I'm starting to be able to do that again. So I'm afraid to say that there's a medical condition that says that I didn't do it, so therefore.
Is it possible that you met Virginia Roberts, dined with her, danced with her in Tramp, had sex with her?
wait, just so we're clear, because they're going to get to the picture in a moment. But his argument that, look, what she's saying is not true, because I have a condition. When I was in the war, I was shot at. And when I was shot at, my adrenaline went through the roof. And in this emancipatory moment where my adrenaline just went apes, my ability to sweat overloaded, and I no longer can sweat. So if I was out there on the dance floor, I wouldn't have been sweating in the way that she said I was sweating. Now, come on, dog. Come on, dog. Come on, dog. Come on. I gotta be honest, even if that was true, I don't think anybody would believe that. And this notion that your sweat glands overloaded, and then to say, only recently have I been doing this kind of therapy and treatment that my sweat glands have started to come out. So if you see me sweating like now, that's because of therapy. But back then, nope, I didn't have the capacity to sweat like that. Sweating now. You're sweating now. That's an extraordinary answer. I love that. That's an amazing answer. That is an amazing answer.
No.
Do you remember meeting her at all?
No.
Do you know you didn't meet her, or do you just not remember meeting her?
No, I don't know if I've met her. But no, I have no recollection of meeting her.
Because she was very specific. She described the dance that you had together in Tramp. She described meeting you. She was a 17-year-old girl meeting a senior member of the royal family.
Never happened.
She provided a photo of the two of you together.
Yes.
Your arm was around her waist.
Yes.
You've seen the photo.
I've seen the photograph.
How do you explain that?
I can't. Because I have absolutely no memory of that photograph ever being taken.
Do you recognise yourself in the photo?
Yeah, it's pretty difficult not to recognise yourself.
Your friend suggested that the photo is fake.
I think it's, from the investigations that we've done, you can't prove whether or not that photograph is faked or not.
He's saying this photo is not real. There is another 30 minutes of this where he's being hit with one question after the next. After people saw this, their thought was, oh my God, what has he been up to? And he seems guilty as sin. And his excuses for this just seems outright, utterly unbelievable. I think the true part of this is he was engaging with Epstein. The person who's accusing him, who provided this picture, at the very least seems, looking at his response to this stuff, that much more credible after this interview. And from the standpoint of UK politics, this is apparently hit with a certain degree of shaking the royal family. This was a horrible train wreck of an interview, and I can't believe he would sit down and do this particular interview. The sweat thing is hilarious. And again, it's not just him. I mean, it seems like Epstein was protected. And even from this notion of how he died and all this stuff, it's bizarre. But Epstein had political, media, and entertainment connections. His connections were all over the place. Even in this interview, he talks about the number of people who would show up at Epstein's place. This interview was an outright train wreck, and that's to put it mildly. I'll put it at the bottom so you guys can see for yourself. Like, share, subscribe. Think so.